Thank you very much. So
lovely. And Pierre, welcome. My name's Claire Barrett. I'm a director at APIs First. Delighted to facilitate this session and to hear your story about what you're looking after at Auth0. Please.
Yeah. So absolutely. So thanks, Claire. So thanks for everyone for participating. So maybe just a quick introduction about myself. So Pierre, I'm an account executive at Auth0. I've been an account executive at Auth0 for the past 2 years now. So sort of spearheading the commercial effort across Southern Europe. So when they created the Southern Europe entity, I was sort of a first boot on the ground here in France, where I cover France, Spain, Italy, and Portugal mainly. So about Auth0, maybe just a quick word. So founded by the people who literally wrote the book on identity and access management while working for Microsoft in the early 2010s. Since launch in 2013, we have helped more than 12,000 customers, significantly simplify the complexity of customer identity. Today, there's about 1,000 people working at Auth0. So supporting these 12,000 customers, we handle more than 6 billion logins per month. We have offices pretty much around the world. And some of you may know, we were acquired by a company called Okta 6 months ago. However, everything that we're going to be talking about today will remain relevant in the sense that Auth0 will remain a separate product within the Okta entity. Maybe a quick word on the functional coverage of Auth0. So if anyone is familiar with Stripe as a payment platform, and I'm sure a lot of people are, so I think that's probably the best analogy is whatever Stripe does to payment, Auth0 does for authentication in a very humble way because they're much, much bigger than we are. But the principle behind it is that, Auth0 is authentication in general is not necessarily extremely complex, but it is very much time consuming. It has to be secured. It has to be compliant. Once you've built it, it has to be maintained. And basically the concept of Auth0 is a tool for developers, made by developers, that does the heavy lifting for you. So it allows app builders, developers in general, to work on some cool new functionality rather than spend time on authentication and authorization. And of course, it allows companies, our clients, to have a secure and compliant, user-friendly authentication experience that can be deployed and that can be implemented by someone that is not necessarily an authentication expert per se. So yeah, Auth0, easy to use no matter what type of application you wish to deploy authentication on, whether it is a web app, a mobile app, legacy app, no matter the tech stack, no matter the programming language that you're using, the security protocol, no matter what kind of database your username and password are stored on, no matter the type of identity that you wish to federate, and no matter the use case, whether it is B2C, B2B, B2B, B2C, B2B2E, et cetera, et cetera. We have SDKs and quick starts, to guide you through the deployment process. One use case that we don't handle as much is business to employees, so allowing employees to have access to all the applications. That is more of Okta's domain, so not necessarily a strong suit. Our clients include the likes of Atlassian, IKEA in Europe generally, Siemens. So very, very diverse in size, in use case, in industry as well. And so on top of being very easy to use, we have functionalities that we have functionalities on top of the fact that we are easy to use. Security related functionalities such as out of the box multi-factor authentication. There's a bot management that is included within our solution. We provide out of the box mechanisms against brute force attacks. We can detect when a data breach happens and block the accounts. So these kind of logics that are already implemented and that are designed for the security experts out there. And we also have user experience related functionalities such as out of the box social login. I think there are around 70 social connectors out there. We provide passwordless authentication. single sign-on across your various domains, the ability to federate customer directories, whether it is a Active Directory, a Google Workspace. Yeah, and we do that in a very easy and quick way. Central within the platform is something called the Auth0 rules engine. Essentially, it is just a snippet of JavaScript code that is executed when someone authenticates. And that basically makes Auth0 very extensible. It allows you to push information to third-party software, such as a CRM, a marketing tool, an analytics tool. It can allow you to call an API, for example. It allows you to contextualize the use of multi-factor authentication. If, let's say, I haven't connected to my app in over 3 months, you can write that in JavaScript code. But MFA will be activated next time I log in, or if I connect from a new IP. So these kind of logic that brings a lot of flexibility to the platform. We are a SaaS solution. We do provide what we call private cloud, which essentially means a dedicated tenant that allows our customers to deploy Auth0 and then make sure that the data stays within a certain country. And obviously the platform is highly reliable because obviously we're dealing with authentication, with SLAs, and at 99.99% of the time. So that just gives you a very brief introduction of Auth0, where we're coming from, sort of our approach to the market, and a very brief overview of the functional coverage.
Thank you, Pierre, and a great summary. And I'm sure for any of those of you who are new and Auth0 or curious to learn more, a great background. As I said in the text, anybody who's got some questions, do make this interactive. It's a workshop, not a presentation.
I would like just one quick note, though. I'm not necessarily, so we're a small team. We're a very lean team where there are only 2 accounts executives and 1 sales engineer. The sales engineer already participated and made a few presentations for the past few days. So obviously I want to do the roundtable, but I'm not necessarily, being an account executive, everyone knows that we're not necessarily the most technical people. However, we've had the list of questions that you've kindly sent across, Claire, so we will make sure that we answer all of these. But just a quick FYI that I know, I might not be able to answer all those more technical questions, but yeah.
But you do have the privilege, Pierre, of obviously, I'm sure, talking to many different customers and hearing about some of their concerns and issues around security generally. You framed up this roundtable about navigating and balancing user security versus privacy and convenience, and some of the challenges perhaps that Auth0 or particularly your customers are seeing in achieving that. What are some of your observations about what are some of the trade-offs they're having to make, and how are they going about resolving these?
There's always a trade-off, right? I think there's always some sort of battle between security and the user experience. Some people feel that security goes in the way of a good user experience, and therefore our approach to that has been, you need to think of security. First of all, security needs to be a company-wide sort of a concern, and you need to think of security from the get-go when you're building the app. So one should definitely go with the other. I think what Auth0 allows you to do is, like I said, because we have a very strong security component that is already embedded within the platform, they don't necessarily need to be to trade off between one or the other. They can include both, and from the get-go. For example, and I think the use of passwordless connection is a good example. The ability to make sure that someone that doesn't necessarily have a password gets a link directly on their mobile phone to access the application is a good example of how you can combine security, because you're making sure that the person has their mobile, so it's like a strong authentication, and user experience, because the person doesn't even necessarily have to remember their password. Same goes for every WebAuthn authentication, whether it is via Face ID. I mean, that's a very good example of something that security and great user experience, right? And so these things need to be implemented within the platform from the get-go.
And we've, again, a sort of a bit of a future-looking question for you from that was submitted in advance. What do you see happening kind of, towards the future? I mean, there's more and more concern about not just cybercrime, but particularly API related breaches and security risks. What's your sort of position of how you're helping customers manage this ever more important, topic, not just for CIOs, CTOs, but boards and leaders across, across any size of company?
No, it's a good question. So I had a slide, I think, on credential stuffing. I can't find it exactly, but just to say that, at Auth0, within our platform, we've detected over 40,000 attempts a day in credential stuffing. All the businesses have gone online, especially through the pandemic. So that is, like you said, Claire, an increasing problem. We see a lot of data leaks happen. I think, Facebook's leak was 2 months ago. So the way that we approach that is to be proactive. It's, continuous authentication, continuous security. Meaning that once you've deployed authentication, it's not enough just to protect the front door. You need some sort of continuous audit on your platform. One of the ways that we approach that at Auth0 is via what we call breach password detection. So essentially what we do is that we scan the internet through internal tools or external tools to detect any sort of data breach, detect any sort of data leak, whether it is on the regular web, the gray web, the dark web. And we proactively can block the accounts that would be concerned by one of those data breaches, and make sure that the person is notified that his or her account has been concerned by one of those data leaks. The other thing is, obviously, I don't remember the stats exactly, but I think that people have around 40 to 60 accounts, roughly. That's an average. Probably have a lot more over the internet, and they use 4 or 5 passwords for those 40, 50 accounts. And obviously the use of password managers is not widely used, and therefore there is a risk there. So what we do at Auth0 is provide the ability for our customers to manage very easily the password policy. Make sure that people don't necessarily use, you can have a blacklist of passwords, make sure they don't necessarily use the more regular passwords, make sure they can use the longest sentence as possible, and that they can establish a password very freely. Yeah.
So just leading on from that, maybe a little bit more sort of doubling down, but what would you describe, it's a question from that's registered, what do you see as the minimal acceptable security for an open API in particular?
Yeah, that would more be, sorry, Claire, that would more be a question for my sales engineer. I apologize about that.
That's okay. So sort of stepping back to your customers' scenario, so the space where you're helping people out on a day-to-day basis, particularly perhaps organizations that are maybe not traditionally so cyber. Cyber hasn't perhaps been as high up on their agenda as others. I've worked in banking and with telcos and things, and clearly this is not a new space. But for some people, it's still coming. What would be some of the top 3 things that they might need to be looking out for that would indicate they have a potential security breach, and how might Auth0 assist them with that?
So the top 3 things I would need to look if they have well, again, that would go back to proactively, what Gartner coined, the continuous adaptive risk and trust assessments, right? Otherwise called CARTA. It's about constantly checking for risk and anomalies. So that goes. There's no necessarily one single sign. It is a bit more complex than that. And like I said earlier, it's not about only the login or at the front door. the idea is to just keep using, keep the user logged in longer, even you can have endless sessions if you want, and to trigger a re-authentication or context-based authentication only if an anomaly is detected. And like I said, we do have embedded within our system a way to detect those anomalies. So several factors are taken into account. One factor can be a so-called, device fingerprint. The fingerprint has nothing to do with the finger or the user, but it is the term for a collection of device-specific attributes. If we take a web browser as an example, it has certain attributes like installed fonts, installed plugins, preferences. So for every browser, you can generate a unique value, or so-called hash, which can be used to identify a returning user, even without having to access cookies. So Auth0 does use a combination of signals. So like I said, it is a combination of signals. Maybe it would make more sense if let me share my screen actually.
Sure.
I don't know if I can for some reason. Oh, wait up.
Should be able to be.
Yeah, here you go. Do you guys see my screen?
Yes, just a minute.
So yeah, so to answer your questions, Claire, here's just a few signals that we use within the anomaly detection engine to see whether their account has been compromised, right? So IP reputation, domain reputation, and we allow our customers to have their own business logic based on these various signals.
Okay.
That's it.
If anybody who's just who's been joining us, Pierre's here with us from Auth0, and do put any questions in the chat if you'd like to take the opportunity to ask him directly. And you mentioned at the start the recent your now relationship with the Okta organization, obviously still maintaining the Auth0 product and brand and everything within that. What are some of the synergies that you're finding with that extended relationship that are helping your clients?
Yeah, so I think there's a two-part to that. The first one is that Okta comes from a B2E, authentication for employees world, whereby they are very strong when it comes to talking to IT departments. And like I said in my introduction, we cater our message mostly, if not only, to developers. So that is our crowd. Auth0, and I think that was one of the questions prior to starting the session here, is how do I get started? And Auth0 makes it very easy to get started when it comes to authentication, and that's the whole purpose of our platform. Is whether it is via free trial, so you can sign up on Auth0, whether it is having a very comprehensive documentation, we make it very easy to get started. And so to answer your question, Okta is more directed towards IT and B2E, whereas we are developer based and looking at B2C and B2B use cases. So very complementary in that way.
Yeah, and of course, the domain for security management for people is this endless top to bottom.
Yeah, I mean, Okta obviously has had a few good years, and I think people working from home, working from home policies have greatly helped to make sure that employees have a seamless access to their work environment while working from home. And obviously, looking at B2C and B2B use case, obviously there has been a spike in terms of online usage. And therefore people need to manage that spike, and it takes like I said, it requires a lot of work. It is very time consuming, and therefore we help greatly in that, making sure that taking that weight from our client's shoulder and handling the authentication.
Mm-hmm. We've had a question about API documentation, how it's evolving generally, and impact on customers. And you mentioned briefly the Auth0 help, and you're very developer-centric documentation approach. What are you doing, and what plans have you got going forward to sort of make that continue to focus on that and make it even better, perhaps?
Yeah, so it's funny because it has to do with the way that we recruit the people. So like I said, keeping the documentation fresh and relevant is extremely important for us. If you were to go on Google and type authentication, there's a good chance that, you know, or anything related to authentication, that you would fall onto one of our documentation page. And so what we do is that we recruit the right people for that. So I know that when it comes to SDKs, for example, so depending on the programming language that your app is using, we actually recruit the people that write those. So it has to do with the recruitment and making sure that we're keeping the right people with the right mindsets. And so, for instance, at Auth0, we have what we call developer support engineers. So that are people that, not salespeople, not at all, they're not here to sell, but they just, you know, help people on online forums with the documentation, with the APIs, and they make sure that they sort of cater to that developer community just by being helpful. It's like preemptive support, basically. So there's no charge associated at all, but they're just here to evangelize Auth0 amongst the community.
No, I love that philosophy of, if you've got people who are part of your organization, passionate about your product, that their communication to your customer base, your developers, is so critical to the talent.
A good example of that. So we had a meeting last week with a large insurance company, and, you know, the room is like you have in those large meetings where they're looking to acquire a new SIAM solution, and so we quickly spotted the fact that one of the person the person in charge of the whole project of a SIAM changing for a SIAM solution was an Auth0 user, but he wasn't an Auth0 user in the context of his large insurance company. He was an Auth0 user at home. I think it was for his girlfriend's e-commerce website, and that just goes to show. So he knew our solution inside out prior to us joining he probably knew our solution better than we did. Which just goes to show the importance of, you know, being able to preemptively make sure that people are happy with our solution. And it also goes to show that the solution needs to work. Like, if it doesn't, you're not going to be able to convince people to use them at a larger scale. So when someone sets up a website to sell necklaces for his girlfriend, the solution works. Then, you know, it pays off over time. People tend to be more confident.
Yeah, I mean, what a lovely example of you know, the new buyer in an enterprise organization may have a very different profile and an existing experience, and all of that credibility that you built supporting his his other role is all kind of hands-on experience for that process. No, great, lovely example. Thank you for bringing that. I realize we're already at time, if you can believe it. I hope that those of you who've been watching in on this conversation have got some value out of hearing from Pierre and Auth0. It's been lovely to talk to you this morning.
Thanks, Pierre.
Paris. Can see the street in the background. It's lovely from your room.
Yeah, it's Paris. It's a beautiful day out, so it's fine.
I know. I'm here myself, and it's really lovely.
Okay, cool.
Good to meet you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Pierre.
For joining us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.